Hi everybody, I'm Brenda KB Anderson. Welcome to our live crochet event. Today we're going to be talking about a Christmas tree skirt, and I'll be teaching you how to work this pattern that I made, and we're going to go through all the steps so that you'll feel comfortable to make one too. So just to let you know, this pattern is free for anyone. If you want to print out the pattern or check it out, please just go to the comments and look for the link, and that will bring you to the place where you can download the pattern for free. So it is called the Silent Night Christmas Tree Skirt. And let me just tell you, when a lot of times we get requests for Christmas tree skirts, it's kind of a popular item. And when I was asked if I was interested in designing one, I leapt at the chance. I was so excited. I have actually never made one before until I designed this particular skirt. But the Christmas tree skirt that I've been using for the last 10 years is very sparkly and very sequiny, and I really wanted something in my house to reflect the other things that I put out at Christmas. I have a lot of things from that my grandparents had given me over the years, and I like to bring them out, you know, sentimental Christmas stuff, and it, like my grandfather's old toy train and things like that, and it just seemed kind of weird on this big sequiny tree skirt. So I was really excited to design something that had a little more of a cozy, subdued feel to it, and I was thinking about Christmas time memories of me sitting in my parents' living room and just watching the snow fall outside the living room window. So you'll kind of see that reflected here in the Christmas tree skirt. It's worked from the center out, back and forth in turned rows. So that way we have an opening here that you can close with the buttons. And so you start at the top and you're gonna go back and forth, and a lot of this Christmas tree skirt is single crochet. So even if you're a little newer at this, you can still do it. One thing that I forgot to mention, I wanted to let you know too, that this is interactive. So if you want to say hi, tell me what you're working on, maybe tell me how many Christmas presents you're making, just leave a comment in the chat box. Or if you have any questions, definitely ask me questions if I'm doing something that you need a little more clarification, or if you're just wondering something else. So please let me know if you have any questions. So back to this, you're going to work it back and forth in turned rows. A lot of it is single crochet for most of the tree skirt, single crochet back and forth, but you'll see these little puff stitches here and there, just kind of scattered throughout. Those are all written up in the pattern, so you don't have to think about where to place those. And then when you get towards the end, you'll have these little lovely cabled Christmas tree emblems at the bottom. So if you're a little newer at crocheting, this might look a little overwhelming to you, especially if you've never worked a post stitch before, or if you don't even know what I'm talking about. Like, what's a post stitch, Brenda? I don't even know what that is. That's okay, because we're going to go through all of that. These cables are actually a lot simpler than a lot of other crocheted cables, because they don't actually, there aren't a bunch of stitches crossing over each other. So back and forth. So it'll be a little bit simpler. So this is a really great project. If you're thinking about making the tree skirt and you're a little bit unsure because of the cables, just go for it, okay? And I will help you with showing you everything you need to know. And then there's a little row of puff stitches, of course, at the very end. And after it's worked from the center out, after you've done that, then you're going to work back and forth in turned rows here, just to add these little button bands on. So let's get started on this. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to print out the pattern. Like I said earlier, in case you missed it, there is a link for the pattern in the comments section. So print out the pattern, and then you're going to need some materials. You'll need a crochet hook. I used an eye, which is a 5.5 millimeter hook, but you're just going to have to check your gauge, do a gauge swatch and check your gauge to make sure that that is the right size for you. It's okay if you need to go a little bigger or a little smaller on the hook in order to match my gauge. So your gauge swatch will look like this. It's just going to be single crochet back and forth in turned rows, and you'll measure it this direction and this direction, and it should be 4 inches each way. And once you've achieved that, you'll know which hook to use. And then you're going to need 10 balls of this yarn. The yarn that I used, it's all written up in the pattern. So it'll tell you what type of yarn. This is an acrylic and wool blend. And the size is CYCA number 4. You can see that on the ball band. On most yarns, it'll have CYCA and then a number. It's a number 4, which is the worsted weight. This is the weight that is most common for Afghans, and if you go to a big box store or something like that, then you'll see just tons of this size yarn. So that should be easy to find. So you need 10 skeins of that. That's in your pattern as well. And then you're just going to need some wooden buttons, or whatever kind of buttons you want to put on here, actually. You don't have to use what I used. I did put the size that I used in there, and I would wait until you are finished with the tree skirt to buy your buttons, because then you'll know exactly what size you need. It should be the size that I listed if your gauge is exactly like mine. But just to be on the safe side, I usually wait until I've completed something, and then I use some buttons that I already have at my house. They could be even attached to a coat or something. Pop it through the hole and see if that's the size you want, and then you can order or go to the store and buy that size button. All right, so let's get started. Most of the instruction today is going to be based on those cabled trees at the end, but I am going to run through everything you need to know, so we're going to start at the very beginning. So you are going to be chaining a much longer chain than I am going to be doing. I'm just doing 1/6 of the skirt. So if you imagine, a big pie sliced up into 6 pieces, I'm just going to be doing 1/6 of it. So the first thing we're going to do is I am just going to chain 9, but you're going to be chaining much more than that. You'll be chaining 49, I think. Yeah, 49. So I'm going to chain 9. So you put a slip knot on your hook, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we're going to skip that first chain. The first chain counts as your turning chain. And we're going to work into the back bump, which if you look at your chain, there's the V's on the top that you normally would work under. But I always like to start, almost always like to start working into the back of my chain, back or the bottom. Some people call it the bottom bump. There's other names for it too. But basically where all these little horizontal dashes are. So we're skipping the first one, and we're going to go into the second one, and we're just going to do a single crochet all the way across. So we insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing. Insert hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. All the way across. And so I will have 8 stitches, but you will have 48 stitches, because you're going to be making the whole thing, not just a sliver of it like me. Okay, and then when you get to the end of your row, you're going to chain 1 and turn. That's your turning chain. And then you're going to work in the opposite direction. So you're going to do a single crochet in the first stitch, then 2 in the next stitch. So that's an increase. So you're going to put 2 stitches in this stitch right here. 1, 2. And then single crochet in the next 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then, of course, you would have a much longer ways to go. You would continue what I just did. So you would go 2 single crochets, and then one single crochet in the next stitch, and then you do 2 single crochets in the next stitch, and then 6 more single crochets. So you're going to repeat this exact same thing 5 more times. Okay, and when you do those repeats, I highly recommend marking the first stitch of each repeat. So on that first single crochet of the repeat, you would put a stitch marker in just like that. So if you had another repeat here with 1 more stitch here, you'd put another stitch marker. So you're going to have a total of 6 stitch markers across your piece. And it doesn't seem like you need to keep track of that much now, but you're starting very small, and then you're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And these stitch markers are going to help you make sure that you have the right amount of stitches each time you work across them. So that way it'll just help keep your stitch count better, more even. You'll keep track of it better. And it's not super important if you'd miss a stitch here and there. It's still going to be pretty good, but at the end, when you start doing all the cabling, then it'll get really confusing because you really need to have the perfect amount of stitches across when you're starting all those cables. Otherwise, it's going to be very confusing. So we've done the first 2 rows. We're going to do row 3. We would single crochet in each of the next 5 stitches, and then we're going to do another increase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, oops, and then we're going to do an increase, and that just means we're doing 2 single crochets in the same stitch. 1, 2, and then single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and then when you get to that marked stitch, you'll pull it out, do your new stitch in there, and then you're going to put your stitch marker back in. So you make sure you keep track of all those stitches. All right, so you've done the 3rd row. You chain 1 and turn. And again, these turning chains, they don't count as stitches. So you're just going to chain, and then you will not stitch into that chain ever again. Let me just check for a second and see if there's any questions so far. Oh. Thanks, you guys, for the compliments. That's very sweet. Ooh, Dawn is adding a bunch of amigurumi for Christmas bingo. That sounds awesome. I love making amigurumi. Oh, thank you, guys. You're so sweet. All right. So now we're going to do row number 4, and this is where we start the puff stitches. If you've never worked a puff stitch before, that's okay. I'm going to show you how I did it in this tree skirt. So we're going to single crochet in the next 2 stitches, just regular single crochets here. Replace our marker. And then we're going to do a puff stitch in the next stitch. Whoop. That yarn really wanted to come out of there. There we go. All right, so then we're going to do a puff stitch in the next stitch. So in order to do a puff stitch in this skirt, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. And we do those steps 4 times. So that was the first time. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up. 2. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up. 3. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up. That's 4. So now we have a whole bunch of loops on here, and that's what makes it nice and puffy. So we're going to yarn over, pull through everything, and that counts as your puff stitch. Now I'm going to do that one more time so you guys can see what I'm doing one more time, but also I also want to note, if you've never done a puff stitch before, it really, really helps to pull up a little higher on those loops than you normally would, because when you do that final pass through and you bring your hook all the way through, it can get stuck in those loops if you don't make them tall enough. So we're going to do it again. So we're going to do these motions 4 times. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up. 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 That was 4 times. Yarn over, and those loops are elongated enough that I can pull through. And I like to twist my crochet hook down a little bit so that it doesn't get stuck in those loops as I pull it through. Then you're going to make sure that this loop doesn't get too long here, because then that leaves a kind of an ugly gap. So you're just going to make sure that's nice and close right there. It doesn't have to be super tight, but just close to your puff. And then you're going to do a single crochet in the next stitch. So we're going to do 6 single crochets here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we're going to do 2 single crochets in what is my last stitch, but you're going to continue doing this exact same pattern all the way across. And one thing I want to note is, see how my puff stitches isn't really very puffy right here? That's because it all got popped to the back. But after you work the next row, or even right now, you can just take your finger and push from behind to push all those loops to the front to make it nice and bubbly so that it sticks out like that, 3-dimensional. So you're going to continue that all the way across the row. And then, guess what? The rest of the skirt, until we get to the tree cables, is the exact same thing. So you're going to be doing increases where you're instructed to do the increases. So that way it becomes a circle. Basically, every other row, all of the wrong side rows, I should say, all of the wrong side rows on this tree skirt are straight single crochet across. No increases, nothing funny after this point. After just the first couple of rows. Every single other wrong side row is just going to be single crocheting across. On the right side rows, you will be doing your increases. So you're going to be doing increases where they're specified in the pattern, and I put them in there so they'd be kind of in random places so that you wouldn't end up with a hexagon with those kind of corners. So it ends up being a nice smooth circle. So you just have to watch for where those increases are. And then you're going to be doing, your puff stitches where those are specified. And that's maybe, I think it's every other right side row. So you'll do a right side row without any puff stitches. Then you do a wrong side row. Then you do a right side row with some puff stitches. Okay, so every right side row you're doing increases and single crochets. And every other right side row you're doing puff stitches and also increases. All wrong side rows, just single crochet. Mindless single crochet across the back. That makes it a little bit easier. So now let's talk about those lovely cabled trees. So in your pattern, I made a diagram for you because I really need diagrams for visualizing things. It really, really helps me. I'm a visual learner. So I like to include them in my patterns when I can. And this is a diagram of what you're going to be doing. Here, actually, let me put this next to it so you can see. Just compare, and you can see how the diagram actually looks like what this is. It's a nice representation. It shows you where every single stitch goes. So when you get to this section, the cabled section, you don't actually have to even look at this diagram. If you just do not find this helpful at all, you can just read the words and the abbreviations on the page and follow those along, and you will get this. You don't have to know how to read this. I just included both so that way, depending on what kind of a learner you are, you can use either way or both. It helps me to read the words and make sure that I'm on track when I'm looking at the diagram. But then when I get the hang of it, then I just like looking at the picture because then I don't know, it's just easier for me visually. So I'm going to show you while pointing at the diagram what we are working on here. Just going to check and see if anyone has any questions. Okay. All right, I don't see any questions yet. Okay, so here we have worked here we've worked through row 3 of this. Well, we've done row 2 up through row 61, I should say, but it's row 2 on this chart. All the blue plus symbols, those just mean single crochet, and those are worked from the wrong side. So it'd be like if you looked at the back side of this of your cable. So we have just finished. I have worked up through row 61 right here. Then we're going to chain 1 and turn, and we're going to work row 62. And I should say actually, all of the gray and black rows here, those are worked from this side this way. That's how you read the chart, like that. So just going to remove my stitch marker here. So we're going to be working on 62, and this symbol here, I did that so that you could easily see where the increases are. It could also just be 2 pluses here, or that symbol, but I like to make them really obvious so that we don't miss those, because we're still increasing while we are making this cable chart. So we're doing 2 things at once, multitasking. All right, so row number 62, 2 single crochets in the first stitch. So that just means we're doing single crochet, and then we're going to do 2 more single crochets, 1 there, 1 there, and then we start the extra fun stuff. 1, 2. Oh, and I should say too, I know that I'm asking you to use like 36 stitch markers or something like that to mark where all of these cabled trees start. So if you don't have 36 stitch markers, it's okay. You don't have to run to the store to get those. In order to mark a stitch, if you don't have a stitch marker, you can just use a little piece of yarn. I just want to show you that real quick right now so that you aren't worried about the crazy amount of stitch markers I requested you use in the pattern. So say we wanted to mark this post stitch right here. It's actually in the pattern, I tell you when to put all these markers in, so you don't have to worry about that right now. When you get to the pattern, you'll see. So if you want to mark the post that's right in front of my crochet hook here, you just take a little piece of yarn and lay it across your hook and pull it underneath there, and then you'll wrap the two yarn ends over and pull it through that loop. It's kind of like latch hooking. I don't know if you guys have done that, but I used to do that when I was a kid. So that way you have that marked. You can just use little scraps of yarn if you don't have 36 stitch markers. Okay, so back to row 62. So we've done our increase and we've done 2 single crochets, and now we are going to start doing a treble crochet post stitch. It's called a front post treble crochet. So to do that, we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook 2 times. Then we're going to insert our hook, and I like to just leave that marked until I've already stitched it. You're going to insert your hook going through that same path where you've marked it. So you're going to go from the front of your work around to the back and pop out the other side. You're just going around the post. Then you're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you're going to complete your treble crochet like how you normally would. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, so that's your first front post treble crochet. And you can see this is what the front post treble crochet looks like down here. So you can just read these stitches by looking at the little key down here to know what they are. The next one is a front post double crochet, which is right here. And we are going around the very same post that we already worked around. So we're going to do yarn over, insert your hook in the exact same spot, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, and then so that is coming from the exact same spot. And you can take your stitch marker out now if you want to. I'll do that just to get it out of the way. And then the next stitch we're going to work into is the same. It's down 2 rows below, just like the one we just worked around, that post, the post of this stitch. We're going to do a double crochet, a front post double crochet around that post down there. And then right after that, in the same space, we're going to do a front post treble crochet. So it goes treble, double, double, treble. And you'll notice if you look at this, sometimes it really helps me when I'm moving along through a chart to just kind of look at where all the different stitches are and try to make sense of it. For example, these 2 columns in the middle, these are all front post double crochets right here. They're going straight up and down, and that's what makes basically the trunk of the tree. And then all the front post treble crochets are the ones that come out at an angle. Any kind of angled post stitch like that is going to be the front post treble crochet. So just knowing that when I go back and forth, it just helps me to remember which stitch to do, to switch back and forth. So we're going to do the front post treble in the post right next door to the one that was marked, okay, that same row. So I yarned over 1 time, insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, and then we're going to do that again, except we're making a treble crochet in the same spot. 1, 2, insert, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, and now here's the part where a lot of people get confused when they're doing cables. Maybe they don't realize that they need to skip these stitches. See how there's the single crochet stitches down here. These stitches that we just made are basically taking the place of working into those stitches. Okay, so we're not increasing or decreasing at all within where we are doing our crossing stitches. The only place that we're increasing are these places over here. So we should have the exact same amount of stitches as we need to skip the same amount of stitches as the stitches we made. So we're sort of trading off where we're putting our stitches. So what that means is you need to look behind and see, you have to count 4 stitches to not work into. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We are skipping all 4 of those stitches, and then we're going to insert our hook next into this place right here. So we're going to do a single crochet there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we've made it across row 62 right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, then you're going to continue making a whole bunch of these trees. And now, instead of just making a 1/6 of it, I think I'm making a 36th of it. Because by the time your tree skirt gets to be that long, you're going to have a lot of trees going across. So I'm just showing you how to do one repeat of the tree. All right, so we'll chain 1 and turn. And remember what I said, we're just doing single crochets mindlessly across the back of our work. So we're just going to do single crochets all the way across. And one thing I want to note is you just need to go into the very last stitch you made. You're not going down here into these stitches that you skipped, ever. You're just skipping them forever and ever. All right, so you're going to work your single crochets into those stitches that you just made in that row. All right, and then we're going to do the next row. So we did 62 and we did 63. Now we're going to do 64. So we're going to do single crochet, single crochet, single crochet. Then we're going to do a front post treble crochet down here into the front post treble crochet that we already did. See, this is why I like charts so much, is it shows you exactly where your stitches connect to. So we have 1, 2, 3 single crochets, and now we're going to do a front post treble, wrap, wrap, and now we're inserting our hook underneath this first stitch that we made here, this first post stitch that we made. There we go. And we're going to finish our treble. And like I said before, we're going to be skipping a stitch. Every time you make that post stitch into another stitch, you're skipping that stitch. So you're not going to be working into that single crochet. Okay, you're going to skip that one and then work into the next single crochet. So what that looks like back here, we've worked into this stitch right here, and then we're going to skip this stitch and we're going to work into this stitch right here. So we're just doing a single crochet, and then we're going to do 2 front post treble crochets into the ones below, just like that. Okay, and we're skipping these back 2 stitches. Okay, yarn over. You're inserting your hook around that post. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. And stitching around the post, that's what makes it a raised kind of stitch. And that's what gives the cable, you know, that texture. So we're skipping this stitch and skipping this stitch, and then we're going to do a single crochet into this stitch. And that's the one we just did. We're going to do a treble crochet right here around that one. So yarn over twice. We're going around that post, inserting our hook right underneath that. And we're going to complete our treble crochet like we normally would. You're going to skip that stitch back behind. And somehow I ended up, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Somehow I ended up with not enough stitches. 1, 2, 3. I think maybe I skipped too many stitches. Let's just check. See, this is why it's good to have stitch markers, so that by the time you get to the end of a section, I think I skipped too many right there. Yeah. There we go. By the time you get to the end of the section, you know how many stitches are supposed to fit there. And then you know right away when you've made a mistake, because it is a big bummer if you don't realize by the time you're down this far on the skirt, and you know there's a lot of stitches around the outside of the skirt. So, you know, it's good if you can catch your mistakes earlier before you have to rip out a very long row. All right, so now we're going to chain 1 and turn our work, and we're going to do a single crochet all the way across, because we're working the wrong side. And let me just see if I can look over here for questions, if anybody had any questions. Okay, don't see any questions. All right, so I've single crocheted all the way across. I'm going to do my 1 turning chain. And so far we've worked these 2 sets of post stitches, and then we're going to do row number 66 right here. So this is almost exactly the same as what we just did, only we're angling this over a little more. So we're going to do 1 single crochet here. We're going to do a treble here, and remember to skip that stitch. Do a couple of single crochets. Then you're doing a treble post stitch again here, and a double front post double crochet right here. Front post double, front post treble. Remember to skip that stitch, and skip this, skip the single crochets behind these 2 as well. And then you're going to do single crochet, front post treble around that post. So the cool thing about this stitch pattern is that once you set this up right here in this very first row, it's pretty easy to see where you're putting your stitches, because every time you're adding new post stitches, they go into a post stitch you've already made. You don't have to go finding, the post within the single crochet fabric ever again after after you do row 62, it gets easier. All right, so row 66, single crochet, and then we're going to do front post treble, and then we're going to skip that stitch. We're not working into that one, but we're going to work into the next one. Single crochet, and then we're going to do a front post treble over here into this post. Just like that, and then a double into the same stitch, and then you're going to do a double and a treble into the stitch. Double, treble, and then remember we have to skip the stitches behind, the ones we just made. So let's see, we just made all 4 of these stitches. Remember to skip all 4 of those single crochets back here, so you can count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip those all of those. And then you're going to do 2 more single crochets and then a front post treble. So wrap it twice underneath the post, just like that. And then we're going to end with 1 single crochet in the last single crochet, because we're skipping the stitch, that single crochet right there. All right. So that's what we have so far. And the cool thing is you've almost learned your way all the way through this tree. Because as you can see, if we take a look at this diagram here, row number 64 is identical to row number 68, except that there's this little increase over here. But I know that you guys, we already showed you how to do that. I know that you guys, you won't miss that, because you'll see this here in the chart and know you just put 2 single crochets in there. But those 2 rows are the same. See how the stitch pattern, all the post stitches, they go, it's just like we just copied that and put it there. And then when you get to row 70, that is identical to row 66 right here. See how those are the same? And then, except, you'll have 1 extra stitch to stitch into because you increased over here. But that has nothing to do with all the post stitches. We already learned all that. And then again, row 72, that is the same as row 68 as row 64. So you've already learned that too. So we're going to go through, and then remember, on all of those, you're going to be doing just plain single crochets on the wrong side. So you've already learned everything up until this point. Then row 74 is almost the same as row 70. There's 1 little difference. It's just because you don't have that extra front post treble crochet right here, because we are just sort of entering the plain trunk land here. So I will show you how that looks. After you've done all of your repeats that I just talked about, you're going to get to row 74. Your piece will look just like that. Well, actually it won't. It will be huge because it'll be attached to your big giant tree skirt. And you're going to start getting really excited at this point because you are almost done with this amazing project. So 74, you're going to do 2 single crochets into that very first stitch. Okay, it's on the chart right here, 2 single crochets. And then you're going to do a front post treble into the front post treble below, yarn over, go behind that post, complete your treble, skip a stitch. So we're skipping that one. Now we're going to go in here and we're going to do 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to do a front post double crochet and another front post double crochet. Okay, so far we have done the 2 single crochets, front post treble, 3 single crochets here, and then front post double crochet, front post double crochet. You got to remember to skip those 2 stitches behind there. Then you're going to do 3 single crochets and then another front post treble. Okay, so we're skipping those 2 stitches back behind, 1, 2, and we're going to work 3 single crochets, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll do a front post treble, 1, 2, we wrapped it twice, and you're going around our post stitch, just like that. Remember to skip this corresponding stitch behind, and you're going to do 2 single crochets here. All right, and then you're going to work your wrong side single crochet all the way across, which I've already done in the sample here, so it'll look like this. And now we're going to be working on row 76. That's here. We're just doing the trunk of the tree. This is so simple, you guys, because we've already done all this and figured out cables by now. And we've learned so much. All right, so 76, we're going to do 6 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a double crochet, front post double right here, just like that. There we go, there's another one. And then we're going to do 6 more single crochets. Okay, so skip those 2, and we're going to do single crochets basically to the end. Okay, when you get to the end, you'll chain, work your wrong side row, and then you're going to repeat. Row number 76 is exactly the same as row number 78 here. So you'll do exactly what I just did, and you will end up with a piece that looks like this. Okay, except it'll be much bigger, of course. It's attached to your whole skirt. Then when you get to the very end, the last stitch, you can fasten off. Okay, so you'll just cut your yarn and pull it through to fasten off. And then you are going to go all the way back to the very first stitch of that last row that you did. I have you place a stitch marker in it so that it doesn't get confusing, but I'll just show you real quick. So what we're doing here is we're just working the puff stitches across this edge here. So, you know, you've got this big circle, you're going to come all the way over to this corner, and then you're going to work your puff stitches in this direction. So the reason that we don't just turn our work where our hook ended up at the very end of that row and then work across this way is because I wanted the puff stitches to be worked from this side, because they just look a little different, a little better. They look fine from this side, but they're like a little diagonally, so I'm kind of particular about things. So you know what? If you're like, you know, that's good enough for me, you can just turn and work your puff stitches from the opposite side if you want to, but you won't regret it if you fasten off and then begin again. So you're going to keep the right side facing on your skirt, and you're going to pull up a loop of yarn here. So you'll just insert your hook and pull up a loop, just like that. And then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to do a puff stitch in the same stitch. Okay, so you're going to do, remember the puff stitches? We wrap the yarn around the hook, insert, wrap, pull up a loop, wrap, insert, wrap, pull up a loop. We do that 4 times. just like that. Yarn over, pull through everything. Then we're going to chain 1, and you're going to skip the next stitch. And then you're going to do a puff stitch in the following. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yarn over, pull through everything, chain 1, skip the next stitch. So basically we're doing a puff stitch in every other stitch, and then you're just doing a chain 1 in between each puff stitch. One, 2, 3, 4. Chain 1, skip the next one. Okay. Couple more left, and you'll be doing this all the way across the bottom of your skirt. And when you get to the end, you know the pattern has been puff stitch, chain 1, skip 1. When you get to the very end, you're going to do a puff stitch in the second to the last stitch. Then you can chain 1, and then you're just going to do a single crochet into that last lonely stitch. Just 1 single crochet at the bottom. And that'll help you turn. So by turning, what I mean is we are going to start working sideways now along our skirt. Just imagine that your skirt, you know, this extends the length of your skirt. Actually, let me just show you real quick what I'm talking about. So we don't have to imagine, we can just look at it. All right, so here's where we're going to be working. We just ended right here on our skirt. We're going to be doing the side that has the buttonholes in it first. So instead of working back and forth like this, you're going to turn and go 90 degrees from where you were going before, and you're going to go back and forth here, like this, back and forth here. And then we are going to be skipping a few stitches, and that's what makes the buttonholes. All right, so just to demonstrate what that looks like, I instruct you to divide your work, the whole long length of your work, into 4 sections. And so what you can do is you can find the middle. You could just fold the edges together, find the middle, and put a stitch marker. So this is going to look a little silly because I'm only going to show you like one buttonhole, but I'm going to show you. Imagine this was the whole long length of your of the side of your tree skirt. So you'll just fold your tree skirt like that, and then you'll put and actually you want to fold it. I'll be a little more particular. You want to fold it so that it matches up with wherever you're going to be working next. So put the 2 corners touching each other basically, and then you're going to just put your hook right in the middle, so that divides it in half, right? So now you know how much space you have for half the amount of stitches. And then on yours, you would divide that in half again and put a stitch marker here. Actually, I can do that on mine, even though it's kind of silly. And then you're going to divide this in half too. You'll fold it, find the halfway point. This is how I like to distribute my stitches evenly. Otherwise, it is really hard to tell because how many stitches to put in each section, because you're not actually stitching into a stitch that's already there. You're just stitching into different, like the sides of the stitch, and there isn't a particular place that you have to put your hook. So for me, let's see, I'm going to do, I think I'll just do enough so that we have enough for one buttonhole. Let me think. Okay, so we'll do 18 stitches across, and I'm going to have 9 stitches here and 9 stitches there. So 9 doesn't divide in half. That's fine. This might happen to you sometimes when things just don't divide evenly. You can just say to yourself, okay, I'll do 4 there, 5 there, 4 there, 5 there. Then you have your 18. So we're going to chain 1. That doesn't count as anything. That's just to kind of help us turn this corner. And you're just going to start inserting your hook wherever it looks like a good spot and doing single crochets. So I'm going to be doing 5 here. And you may think, oh, this is a nice big hole here, I'll fill that up. Sometimes if you work into those sections, here, I'll just show you what it looks like. It might make the hole bigger. It might stretch it out. Here, you can see a little better with my finger behind it. It might actually make it worse. Call more attention to the hole. So I like to put my hook into a space that's a little tighter. It takes a little more time, but then it doesn't stretch it out quite so much. So here we have 2 single crochets, 3, 4, 5. And then you can take the stitch markers out as you get to them. That's just to help you distribute your stitches. And then we're going to be doing 4 in this section, but like I said before, you're going to be doing a lot more. I think you actually do, can't remember off the top of my head, it's in your pattern, but I think you do 17 stitches between each set of markers, but definitely check your pattern. Don't just go by what I'm telling you right this second. But it specifies in your pattern how many stitches to put in between each set of stitch markers. So you'll have the proper amount. And now I'm going to be doing 5 here. So this is one of the things I really love about about crocheting. It's really easy to just switch up what direction you're working or add on here and there. It's just, I don't know. I find it kind of freeing to design and crochet because there's so many, you can just turn the corner and start working in the opposite direction really easily. You can do that in knitting too, but for some reason it just doesn't seem quite as easy. You have to pick up all those stitches. All right, so here we are. So you've done all the crochet all the way along the whole side of your scarf. Suddenly I'm making a scarf. Your skirt. You're going to chain 1, turn your work, and then you're going to single crochet all the way across. Just 1 in each stitch. And then on the following row, that is where we start skipping stitches to make those buttonholes. And I'll just tell you, the other side of the button band, you know, the one that you sew the buttons onto, that one doesn't have any buttonholes in it, of course. So at this point, you know, you're gonna crochet in the same way. You're gonna work into your row ends just like we just did, and then you're just gonna go back and forth, and that's the end of that. Fasten it off and weave it in. So that one is simpler. I just wanted to show you the one with the buttonholes so that it would make sense. Okay, so I reached the end. I'm going to chain and turn. Now we're on the 3rd row of the buttonhole band. And we're going to do 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to chain 2 and skip 2. Skip 1, skip 2. And then we're going to do 8 single crochets here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And on your version, this is the proper amount of repeats and the chains and all that stuff. You're just going to continue this across your much longer piece than I have. So I'll just go as far as I can. 1, 2, 3. Oops, I don't have to do those 3. Those 3 are just outside of the repeat. We just do the 3 and then the chain 2, skip 2, 8 single crochets. And that's the chain 2, skip 2, 8 single crochets. That is the part that repeats. So at this point, after you've done the 8 single crochets, you're going to chain 2, skip 2, and then you do your 8 single crochets. And I'm going to run out of space, but that's okay. Then you're going to chain and turn, and you're going to work single crochets all the way across because it's the wrong side row. All right, and when you get to these chain 2s, you can do one of 2 things. You can just work right into that chain if it's easier. Sometimes, because it helps me distribute my stitches a little more evenly, I will actually work into the chain instead of into the space below the chain. But I think I chained that a little tightly. Let's see. There we go. I can do it. There we go. Okay. Single crochet, single crochet. okay, into each of those chains, and then just continue across. Until you get to the next chain 2, and then you're going to do the same thing. So on this one, I'll do the opposite thing, where I just crochet into that space. You can also do that if that's easier. Just work into the space, 1, 2, and that looks fine. If I have chains like that, like if it's a really long space, sometimes I will just work into the chains instead of into the chain space because it helps distribute my stitches better. But for just 2, it's really not that big a deal. It's just personal preference, really. And then you keep doing that all the way across. So you get all your buttonholes worked into, and then you're going to do, I think there's 2 more rows. Yeah. Or maybe just 1 more row. Yeah, there's 1 more row because there's 5 rows in the buttonhole section. So then you would just go all the way across and fasten off, and then you would fasten on to the other side, do the opposite button, the strip where your buttons are actually attached to without the buttonholes, and then it will look like this. I'll just show you this one more time. And that's when you can test out, actually, even after the first button, or if you want to do a gauge swatch. That's when you can just test out some buttons and make sure that you have the size that you want before you buy them out at the store. So let me just check over here and see if there are any questions. Oh, thanks for the compliments, guys. Oh, did I see you? So Perry says, did I see you decrease on this side or put your hook into 2 places before single crochet? Let's see. Decrease on this side. I didn't decrease anywhere on the skirt, so there wasn't a decrease. Let's see. Put your hook in 2 places before single crochet. Trying to figure out what you mean. Perry, if you're still watching, if you could clarify what part that happened. Let's see. Then maybe I can answer your question for you. There are no decreases though in the entire skirt. There's only increases. And when you're doing the cabling section, there are some increases within the single crochet fabric, but there aren't any increases within making the post stitches. I hope that helps. But no decreasing. Okay. So, one more thing I wanted to talk about. So if anybody has any more questions, please ask them now because we're nearing the end of our session. But one thing I wanted to talk about was blocking. So when you finished your piece, you're going to weave in your ends. And I feel like a lot of people hear the blocking word and they're like, la, 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 blocking. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But, and I was definitely one of those people for many years. But I did block this tree skirt with a little steam. I find personally that when you're working up something in crochet that's mostly acrylic or completely acrylic, I feel like it responds really well to steam. And meaning, if you've never blocked anything before with steam, you can get a regular iron, just whatever iron that you use, and put it on a very high setting. Even if, for example, this is acrylic and I put it on the cotton setting. You never want to touch your iron to your fabric. So you don't actually put it on it. You're just going to hover it above and try to put it on a setting that gives you the most steam. So I put it on cotton and then I turn my steam. Some irons have like a steam setting where you can pick how much steam you want to come out, or if you have like a long burst, or I don't know what they call it, but find the setting on your iron where you can get the most steam to shoot out of your iron. Be careful because you don't want your hands anywhere near it. And then you're going to hold it up above your work, a few inches above your work, and just let the steam come down, move your iron away, and then you can, carefully kind of pat your piece in place as you're doing that. You can just kind of steam, but I found that it really helps, especially with these little trees, to sort of pinch the top here to make a nice point and to sort of just pat these into place. You want to make sure that you are not doing that while the steam is coming out, of course, because I don't want any of you to burn your hands, please. But I do find that these trees looked so much more crisp and everything. I was able to keep these, the puff stitches to the front side of my work after I steamed them with I would just sort of push them up with my finger, as I was getting them all laid out on my ironing board, and then give it a little bit of steam. And it just sort of helps your project stay in the shape that you want it to be in. So I definitely recommend it. I feel like, it's up to you. I'm not going to come spy on you and be like, did you block that? Did you block the tree skirt? I will not do that. But I just feel like it is, I don't know, it's kind of an epic project, you guys. So if you block it at the end, it's going to look so much better. It's going to look so good. So let me just check one last time, see if there's any more questions, or if Perry did, okay, the buttonhole area. Okay, on the first row of the buttonhole. Okay, so yeah, Perry, I did not do any decreases on the buttonhole. What I did, let's see, I can just show you, let me show you on the finished piece here. Where's my buttons? Okay. Woo. All right, so when I was working the first row of the buttonholes, I'm not adding or subtracting any stitches here. So you'd stitch along, you make a, single crochet, single crochet, single crochet, and then right here, you chain 2 stitches, chain, and you skip 2 stitches, and then you work single crochet, single crochet, single crochet across. So you're not actually doing any decreases or anything like that. You're just skipping over those 2 stitches, and then when you work on your way back, you're doing this row on the way back, then you're gonna, let me flip it because you'd be looking at this side. That might get confusing. So then you're gonna be working your single crochets, and then when you get to those 2 chains, you can either work into the chains here, or you can work into that space right below the chains. But you are doing 2 stitches, 1 in each of those 2 chains. So you're not adding any stitches, you're not subtracting any stitches, you're not decreasing or increasing at all. You're just, what you're doing is you're just making a hole here so that your button can come through. Okay, I hope that clarified it. Oh, yeah, okay. Do I have a similar tree design for a pillow? You know what? This is actually, this question was from Dee. Hi, Dee. Thank you for asking that. This is the first time that I've made this tree pattern in crochet. I've done a couple of knitting things with them, but that looks sort of like this. I mean, obviously it wasn't the same pattern, but after I don't for a pillow, but that is on my list of things to do. I definitely want to do a pillow. And after I did this, I thought this will make a really awesome yoke for a sweater. It's already, curved in that shape. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to do that because after this worked out so nicely, I just had a million new ideas of things I wanted to make with these trees. So hopefully I'll get to the pillow. Thank you for that question. Oh, okay. So Mary is wondering if it's possible just to make the bottom of the skirt so it becomes a scarf. Okay. Yes. Let me pull out my chart here. Okay, so because you're working back and forth in rows like this, your scarf would have to be oriented this way, so it would be like a whole bunch of trees in a forest next to each other, okay? It wouldn't be like trees stacked up on top. You couldn't do your scarf in this direction, if that makes sense. So what I would do is you could make a photocopy of this. If you're a chart person, you could make a photocopy of this chart and then just block off wherever your increases are. So see, there's an increase here and an increase here and an increase here. And unless you want your scarf to be curved, because those increases are what's creating the curve. I mean, actually, it might actually stay on you better if it was curved. That'd be kind of pretty. But if you want a straight scarf, then you're going to have to take the increases out. But I think you can just replace those with single crochets and just, cover up that section. So here's an increase right here. Just cover up this whole section all the way up. And there's an increase here. We're just going to cover up this entire section here and then make that a normal single crochet right there. So, and then you just figure out how many, repeats you want. And if you wanted a little more space between the trees, you don't want them to be right next to each other, then because these increases are making a little more space as they get wider, as the tree skirt gets wider. But if you wanted to put them next to each other, you could add, a couple of straight up single crochets in between. So just figure out your, what your stitch repeat is. I hope that answers your question, but it would make a really awesome scarf. That's a good idea. All right, I think that was all of my questions. So thank you guys so much for your questions and your comments. I'm so excited that you guys were joining me here today. And please, if you do make this, please post pictures of your tree skirts on social media. I would love to see them. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.